And vamunangagwa, the fact is vakafungira kuti ndini ndakanga ndiri the main advisor or the brains behind the faction yakanga ichisapota vamujuru.
Okay.
And vamujuru was clearly opposed kuna vamunangagwa in terms of succession bid. Saka vamunangagwa vakafunga kuti if he gets rid of me from the system, from government, then he would weaken vamujuru.
Okay.
If you recall my the very first voice note that I sent to you,
yes,
ndaka explain my own background, kubva ndichipinda mu-CIO, and my progression ndiri mu-organization kusvika pandakazodzingwa in 1998. And then ndichiexplaina kuti zvese ma-problems andakasangana nawo, the person akanga ari behind all of them ndevamunangagwa. And vamunangagwa, the fact is vakafungira kuti ndini ndakanga ndiri the main advisor or the brains behind the faction yakanga ichisapota vamujuru.
Okay.
And vamujuru was clearly opposed kuna vamunangagwa in terms of succession bid. Saka vamunangagwa vakafunga kuti if he gets rid of me from the system, from government, then he would weaken vamujuru.
Okay.
And inini vamunangagwa vakanga vacreate a network yavo yakakura stereki, like I explained in my two earlier videos. Exactly. He didn't want to relinquish control of CIO. He wanted to continue to influence the CIO behind the scenes because he was no longer Minister of State Security. Inini ndakanga ndakwira nda Deputy Director General, and because of that vaiziya kuti ndinoona vaMugabe on a daily basis. Saka vakafungira kuti pese pandinendiona Mugabe ipapo I would be saying negative things about him.
Okay.
So this was the main problem. Ndosaka after va-influencer Mugabe to dismiss me, hazvina kuperera ipapo. Vakafungira kuti I would make a comeback one day, sometime in the future. So ndopavakatanga manje kuchifunga yekundisungisa, then ndokupesiwa yekundisungisa iyoyo, ndokumva vaona kuti they didn't have a solid case against me. Ndopandakatanga kuona ndakuteererwa mumaroad muHarare. And I explain all this mubhuku imomo, ndichiteererwa ndichienda kumusha kwangu kuChivu, ndichiteererwa kuenda ikoko, ndichienda kumusha kumudzimai ndichiteererwa kuenda nekudzoka. Ndo patakaona as a family kuti our lives were in danger, ndo patakabuda kuenda kuCanada. But again, like I explained in the book and in that first audio, I never expected kuti ndasvika kuCanada ndingati continue to encounter those problems. But vakatanga kuita zvekuti kuno kuZimbabwe vaiita ndingati ma-sessions parliamentary debate. During parliamentary sessions, maive nevanhu vaita ask questions to the Minister of Justice vachiti munhu uyu akaenda kupi, akatiza munhu uyu akatiza muZimbabwe, Minister of Justice, what is he doing to ensure the return of this person to Zimbabwe? akanga ari Minister of Justice at that time anga ari Patrick Chinamasa. Munhu aibvunza ma-questions. There were two people vaibvunza ma-questions muparliament about me. Pearson Mbalekwa, who was a close relative yaMnangagwa, and who had previously been in the CIO. Akanga achirongerwa naMnangagwa to be an MP. He was asking Patrick Chinamasa those questions about me. And also the other person was Shadrach Chipanga, who had been Director General in the CIO at the time that I was Deputy Director General. But he was clearly supporting Mnangagwa. So those two people, Pearson Mbalekwa and Chipanga, they would always very regularly be asking Patrick Chinamasa my questions ekuti, as Minister of Justice, what are you doing to ensure enforce the return of this person to Zimbabwe to face prosecution? At the same time, the other route yavakanga vachita pursue concurrently yakanga iri yekuita work through the police, vachiweka through the police, through the CIO police, ndokuno approach a magistrate vachinyepa kuti ndakanga ndisina kuinda ku court in year 2000, and so I should have been arrested. They said they requested the magistrate to issue a warrant of arrest against me. Vachinyepa kuti ndandisina kuenda ku court in the year 2000, and they were doing this in the year 2008. So they then, because they were pursuing me kuma Canadian authorities through Interpol, vachiti dzosai munhu uyu. But my Canadian authorities vakati tipei justification tinomudzodzosa on what basis? Vakati tine warrant of arrest yake kuno, zvikanzi nema Canadian authorities tinoida warrant of arrest tiione before we can proceed. And these guys didn't have a warrant of arrest.
Okay.
This is why they then decided kuti CIO, Mapurisa, magistrate, voita team up, sit down, forge a warrant of arrest. It dated 2000 and it dated in the year 2000.
Okay.
And yet this was being done in the year 2008. So this is what they did, and pandakazodipotwa from Canada in 2011, no warrant of arrest yandakasvoratidzwa iyoyo nemapurisa kunzi ndo yatakusungira saka takusunga. So and of course Ningikiri, my lawyers vakaita pursue the matter vakaona kuti this warrant of arrest had been forged, because my court records either clearly that I had been to court in the year 2000 and I had been removed from remand, and they had ordered that I should not be pursued again in connection with the same matter except by way of summons. So their efforts to ensure my enforced return to Zimbabwe was unlawful. That's why the warrant of arrest was cancelled a few days after my return from Canada. So you can see I have been a victim of persecution yaMnangagwa, motivated by political considerations. I was suffering, I was being persecuted because Mnangagwa thought I was opposing him, and I was giving advice to people like Solomon Mujuru, who were contesting Mnangagwa's candidacy for presidency. So this is why I was persecuted like that. So it's a true story. I have lived it. I have lived it. I am not motivated by any other factor except the fact that I was persecuted by Mnangagwa's people because of their perception that I belonged to a faction which was opposed to Mnangagwa's ambitions to succeed President Mugabe. So this is it. It's factual. There is no exaggeration, nothing. I have lived this story. I think that's speculative. I cannot say. What I really believe is that this had been planned for years. This had been planned for years. Chakanga chichikisa Mnangagwa na Achiwenga and the other people involved in Matabeleland massacres. Ndeyekuti vanogona kuguma vakuitwa prosecuted for their crimes dzavakakomita in Matabeleland. So what they wanted to ensure was that there would never be a government yavasingatrust. And the best form of the best way of ensuring that was that they wanted to be in government themselves, to be in control of government themselves. So to them, it was critical that in one or another, they should end up being in government after Robert Mugabe. Any other person who had not been involved to the same extent that they had been involved in the Matabeleland massacres, they would not trust that person. Because their fear was that one day they would be dragged to the Hague. And if there was somebody who had taken over in Zimbabwe, who had taken over the government in Zimbabwe, if that person was not themselves, then that person was likely to agree to their prosecution in the Hague.
Do you have bad blood between you and President Emerson Mnangagwa?
I don't have... I have no bad blood at all. There's no bad blood between me and him. In fact, in my book, I thank him for facilitating the granting of a study leave to me. Because in 1978, I was at the University of Zimbabwe studying law. Ndikabva paUniversity of Zimbabwe 1978 ndikaenda kuMozambique kunojoina hondo kuZanula side. Ndadzoka after independence. I worked in 1980. He appointed me, Mnangagwa himself appointed me as first secretary to the embassy in Mozambique, in Maputo. Then in 1982, he came to Maputo while I was there, and I asked for a transfer because I was not too comfortable with the weather in Maputo. So I asked for a transfer from Maputo, and he granted that transfer, and I was transferred to Bucharest in Romania. He is the one who transferred me to Bucharest in Romania, and I was so grateful to him. Then, end of 1983, I continued to have pressure from my family that I should complete my university studies. So I asked Mnangagwa kuti mungandipo here study leave ndiende ku University of Zimbabwe ndinocomplete my law degree, and he granted that. So between January 1984 and December 1986, I was at the University of Zimbabwe studying law, completing my law degree, and he's the one who had facilitated my study leave. So I acknowledge in my book that I am grateful to him for having facilitated that. Yes. The problem yandakazongoona yakanga iripo, to tell you the truth. In the CIO, there was a lot of disgruntlement. Kuti mu CIO, you would not make any career progression kana usina ma connections, tribal connections with Mnangagwa. And also the other type of person he would want was a person who had been in Zambia at the time that he was in Zambia, the time that he lived in Zambia. So prior connections made in Zambia were important to him. Then tribal connections were important to him. If you came from Midlands, if you came from Masvingo, you were trusted by him. And this led to a lot of frustration in the CIO, and I was one of those who were frustrated until President Mugabe made a reshuffle in 1988. And that reshuffle resulted in Mnangagwa being transferred from CIO, from Minister of State Security for Minister of State for National Security to Minister of Justice. Only then did people start to feel change. The person who took over, who succeeded Mnangagwa in the CIO as Minister of State for National Security was Dr. Sidney Sekeramai. And things seemed to start to change for the better. So I have really there is no bad blood between me and him. As I got persecuted by him and by his people during the period that I have described.
Aiwa, tinokutendai nekutsanangura nekujekesa. Ko ava manje ava vari kuti manje imimi muri kusapota general, muri kusaidi kwageneral, munoti chii nenyaya iyoyo? I think ndomubvunzo wangu wekupedzisira ndokusiya zvenyu moenda semunhu ari busy.
You know, I've come across that and I'm so surprised. You know, I'm sure you listened to my video here, which was released by Hopewell Chingono.
Yes.
And I clearly stated kuti vanhu vakanga vari involved in Matabeleland massacres were Emerson Mnangagwa, General Constantino Chiwenga, Parents Shiri, and people like Shiri Huru and Menard Mzariri in the CIO. And I clearly indicated that coup yakamotivetwa nevanhu ivavo because vaitya kuti vanogona kuzoita prosecuted for the crimes, the genocide dzavakakomita kumatebeleland. I didn't talk about Mnangagwa only. I talked about General Chiwenga as well. So how can I be Chiwenga's person?
Saka maybe warutsvagawo kugadzira nyaya.
I don't understand that thinking at all. To me, there is no rationale whatsoever in that thinking. It's strange. I don't understand it.
Aiwa, ndinotenda mukoma nekujekesa. And bhuku riri kuwanika link iri mudescription, endai munongonobaya ipapo mamaendeswa pabhuku straight direct. Handitika hameno mashoko ekupedzisira 1 or 2 amungade kusiyira kuwana vezimbabwe.
Inini, I wish Zimbabwe well. I really am, I feel very sad by the current situation in Zimbabwe. I don't think Zimbabweans were ever meant to endure the hardship that they are enduring. I lived in Zimbabwe for 3 years up to, in fact, I lived in Zimbabwe from 2019 to 2023. After I came back in fact, when I got deported from Canada in 2011, I lived in Zimbabwe up to 2015. Then 2015 to 2019, I was in full-time study at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, doing my PhD in economics. So I returned from South Africa to Zimbabwe in November 2019. And I lived in Zimbabwe from 2019 up to early 2023. The hardships that I witnessed the people in Zimbabwe facing, wow. I never imagined things could get that bad. Electricity blackouts for 18 hours to 20 hours. In the high density, the area I used to visit frequently when I was in Harare, Heathcliff, every homestead, there is a well. A well, people have to dig up a well for their water supply, which is a terrible hazard. Even if the water is obviously not clean enough, but also the hazard that children playing can fall into that deep well. I never imagined Zimbabwe could come to that. It never was anything near that in the past. I saw a lot of hardship, price rises, the industrial area in the Southerton area in Harare. I drove through there on my way to Kambuzuma Mfakose. It's like a ghost area. Ghost area, nothing, no life whatsoever. All those the industries, those plants, and they have long ceased to operate. Where do people get employment when things are like that? So I feel very sad, very, very sad, and I believe if people cannot do things better, they should leave other people to do to try and ensure that people can have a better way of life. People should not be in positions, continue to hold on to positions for the sake of it. People, if people can't run a country, they should admit they can't run the country. They should admit they've failed, and walk away, and let other people who can do it do it. It's so selfish. It's so cruel to insist that people should just accept that things are this bad and they live such terrible lives just because 1 or 2, 3 people want to be in office. It's very selfish. It's very selfish. It's very cruel. It's very wicked. This is the situation in Zimbabwe, and I'm sure it's not meant to be like that. And I'm sure it won't last. That's what I want to say.
Well, thank you very much Mkoma for mashoko aya nekujekesa zvinhu kuti vanhu vanzwisise, vanhu vazive kuti bhuku rakamira sei, bhuku riri kubva kupi richienda kupi uye zviri kumbofamba sei. Aiwa, ndinotenda nenguva yenyu Mkoma.
No, also another thing, I noticed some of these comments are completely unhelpful. I saw a comment saying this person cannot be cannot really be genuine because he should have talked about Itai Dzamara. He should have told us where Itai Dzamara is. And I clearly stated that I was dismissed from the CIO in 1998. I am told that Dzamara was disappeared in 2015. How on earth am I supposed to know what happened to him?
Yeah, I see.
So some of these comments are completely unhelpful. And I think this is the one thing that is very unhelpful about some people in our country. They just paint everyone with the same brush. Some are saying they don't want to know about what happened in the past because it doesn't help us. What we want to know is what will happen in future. But how can you prepare for the future if you don't understand your past? So it's unfortunate. But anyway, thank you very much for this interview, for this conversation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mkombang.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.